Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is October 23rd, 2012, and this is episode number 42.
In this episode, we're going to discuss an increase in the time consumers spend with mobile, the recent Apple announcements, including the iPad mini, how pages are responding to Facebook's wall changes, why the Frank iOS app is a lesson to learn from, how the new food spotting website focuses on discovery, and more. How's it going, Corey?
It's going well. How about yourself, Adam?
It's all right. It's starting to get darker now, sooner, and so we're saying goodbye to the warmer weather, and the rain has come. You guys in San Francisco got it this morning, huh?
Yeah, a little bit this morning and a little bit last night during the Giants victory. Woo! Giants go to the World Series. Crazy.
Well, it kind of happens often in football where the team that wins the Super Bowl ends up winning kind of around the same time within, say, a 4 or 5 year time frame. There's been a lot, I think, like Green Bay and the Patriots that end up winning an awful lot when they were winning Super Bowls. But it doesn't happen a lot in baseball, huh?
Yeah, I mean, going twice in 3 years is pretty impressive numbers. I think it helps in when you win one, other players are probably more likely to want to join the team. So when it comes time to recruit new guys, you're like, hey, we won the World Series a couple years ago. So obviously our team's pretty good and probably helps out there. But yeah, heading back, it'll be a fun time for the city. We'll have to probably cover some SoLoMo news related to the World Series, how people are talking about it, how they're covering it, maybe even some second screen news. I'm sure there'll be some interesting stats coming out of that. We can find some fun way of turning it towards our conversation for the podcast here.
We'll try to get Brian Sarabian, the guy that heads up the social media over there for the Giants, see if maybe he'll come on as a guest and talk about things after they win the whole series.
There you go. I like that idea. So today was the big Apple day. What'd you think of the overall announcements?
I'm just surprised how quickly after the iPhone 5 deal came out. I will talk about it a little bit here after our opening infographic and data segment, but some pretty cool stuff, and I think it's going all in the right direction. How about you?
Yeah, I think some surprises, a lot of big announcements. So we're going to try to cover the marketing side of things, which should be fun. But yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. I enjoyed tuning into the live stream. So looking forward to discussing that one, which will come shortly after our infographic/stat of the week. And this week we return to eMarketer, one of our favorite subjects for a lot of these really great and in-depth stats. And they actually took a look at the way consumers are spending time on mobile and how that is actually increasing in recent years. And just continued positive signs for mobile and the shift towards mobile and the idea that you really should be paying attention to mobile because it's slowly but surely taking over the way that we interact with websites and brands and even each other online. So what they looked at is time spent on activities such as internet, app use, gaming, music, and really, the way that you're using online devices. And they found that in the past 2 years, at least among US consumers, the time spent on mobile devices has actually doubled. So if you look just as far back as 2009, they found that time spent has doubled. That's an incredible rate of change. People had phones 2 years ago. It's just they weren't using them for things like browsing the internet or browsing apps. So I think a huge shift we're noticing there. Kind of some cool stuff. And in addition, they talked about the idea that in 2012, the amount of time consumers will spend on their mobile devices, excluding talk time. So this is actually using apps, browsing the internet, that type of thing. In 2012, it'll grow 51.9% to an average of 82 minutes per day, which is up from just 34 minutes per day 2 years ago. So the amount of time we're spending outside of just talking on our phones has more than doubled in 2 years. So really solid numbers, and I think we're seeing some huge growth here. Adam, do you think these are surprising numbers, or is this just falling in line with other stats that we've seen come out from various studies?
I mean, I think that they would have been considered surprising a few years ago had people thought, and tried to predict exactly what would happen with mobile. But it's probably been over the last year and a half to 2 years that we've seen signs that mobile was going to just ramp up in a big way. And I think it's due to a few things. Let me first say that studies have been showing that, and I don't remember if it was Pew or if it was IDC, but they were talking about how just between the year 2010 and 11, data consumption on mobile devices has increased by 89%. And that was driven by the fact that the cost of devices had decreased, and the cost of data plans had decreased as well. And I would imagine that additionally, because of the maturity of the web, it still has a long way to go, but because the web has started to become more mobile friendly, and many of the major applications or places that people would go on the web on their desktop have become much more mobile friendly, it's made it more acceptable for folks to depend on their mobile devices versus their desktop devices. I have a friend who's trying to cut down on costs. And I see that she's been trying to decide what she wants to do to cut down on costs, and she's made the decision to basically shut off her whole broadband at home in order to save money, because she knows she's going to go with her phone out of the house and she'll come with it home. And I said, well, why would you, shut that off? You've got kids. Don't they want to use the internet? That sort of thing. And she said, really what they want to use it for is, Facebook and a couple other things. Like they could go ahead and use my phone. And so for her, it's very acceptable to use her mobile device as the main point of contact for the internet now. And for most new folks to the internet, or folks that are just starting to buy their first internet connected device, whether it be a desktop or whatever, they're all going towards mobile because they want to have that portability, and they want to have that almost also personal experience of being able to have that thing in their pocket at all times with all their information on it, all set up the way they want to. So no, this doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, the other stat that they were talking about was regarding specifically the mobile ad spend. So they looked at it and they said that the average adult actually spends 11.7% of their media time with phones and tablets. So that's comparing phone and tablet usage to things like print magazines, newspapers, TV, radio, that type of thing. So the average adult spends a little over 10% of their time on phones and tablets. But in terms of ad dollars spent, just 1.6% of the total ad spending is dedicated towards mobile ad dollars. And we're not talking small numbers here. That still represents $2.61 billion per year. And it's expected to rise to $12 billion by 2016. So there is an expected increase. But if you look at it, you've got, over 10% of our time is spent on phones and tablets, but a little more than 1% of our ad dollars are going towards those same platforms. This probably means there's deals to be found. There's not as much demand as there is supply. We're using our tablets a lot, but advertising dollars aren't catching up. So you're really getting a deal if you're out there. You're finding ways of diverting your ad dollars into mobile, and I think for a lot of companies this makes sense. We talk about for small businesses, there's opportunities like sponsoring specific geolocations. You don't have to be intimidated by mobile and think, well, how am I going to target this? People could be anywhere. There's really, even if you were a mom and pop restaurant or something like that, you can still advertise on mobile and potentially get a better return for your dollar, because
there's a lot of context, right? There's a lot of context to people being on the mobile device. And so therefore you can target in a more creative way because of that.
Yeah. And you do have to keep in mind, people are oftentimes browsing on their phones. So they mentioned in the study that a lot of people don't go to their mobile device when they're in a purchasing mood. They're not like, oh, I'm going to shop and actually buy something. Let me get my phone out. That's usually done at home in front of a laptop or in front of a computer. But you're definitely in a browsing mood. You're open to discovery. You're open to, finding new links, discovering new restaurants, discovering new businesses. And so there's, I think, opportunity there to push less product. Don't be as focused on, buy, but instead pushing the entire brand, pushing the entire company and saying, come check me out. I'm close by, or, you're already on your tablet. Here's an experience that I've customized to that tablet market. And using advertising dollars to promote that, because again, there's opportunity here to find some good deals if you're willing to experiment a little bit with mobile.
And how could that tie into advertising and pushing the brand and increasing brand awareness via mobile, but tie that into the experience of when somebody decides that they want to maybe do some more intense research on their tablet at home or on their desktop at home, and that the advertising that you work with in that sense, or the search engine advertising specifically, so that when people are actually searching for that information at the time of typing it into Google or Bing or whatever search engine they use, how can you make that all kind of work together is something to pay attention to. And like you were alluding to, Corey, there is so much room still when it comes to taking advantage of the traffic on mobile, which is continuing to be a bigger and bigger pot to pour some of your advertising dollars into. There's a huge delta where it is, and there's been a lot of companies who have they've made their companies just by being first to market when it came to advertising on platforms like Facebook, because the cost per click and cost per impression were so low because there was such a high inventory at that time. And then eventually, when it kind of matures a little bit more, those costs end up going up, and it's harder to compete in that area. And so this is a time, like you were saying, to take a look at mobile and maybe try to take advantage of that lower cost per click and impression in that case.
One of the places that's definitely going to be receiving its fair share of mobile ad dollars is the new iPad mini announced today by Apple. So Apple had its big, or actually I guess they called it the little event. The invite said, we've got a little something else to show you, but they announced a number of products. Despite being a little event by Apple standards, they rolled out a whole suite of products, but probably the most anticipated, the most discussed, the most debated was the iPad mini. And yes, it is called the iPad mini. I think the name was up for debate, and I had put my money on it just being called iPad, so I was a little surprised they called it iPad mini, though the way they positioned it in terms of size and fitting in your hand, that type of thing, I guess it makes sense. But Adam, what was your take on the Apple events overall? Were you impressed? Were you hoping for more? What was your take?
I actually didn't think it was a small event when you really look at what they've done across the board. I think they did a real good job in the short amount of time to kind of hit all of the different products that they had, because, they went from desktop to talking obviously about that they released not just an iPad mini, but a revised iPad much earlier than expected. But I think that what I was a little bit more impressed with was the something that maybe wouldn't really be something the marketers could care about that much, but I think it was the Fusion Drive technology that they have for their desktop computers right now, and the ability that that has to speed up what you can do with your computer and your workflow and so on. But that's on a more technical level. I think the thing that I paid attention to from a marketing perspective was whether or not the new form factor for the iPad mini was going to cause any disruption in how people would have to create content for folks that would consume content on their devices, considering the fact that iPads drive something in regards to, and they said it during the presentation, and I've seen it elsewhere, something like over 75% of tablet-based web traffic is coming from iPads.
I think they actually said it was over 90%.
Yeah, I was trying to be conservative because I thought it might sound a little outlandish, but it was pretty incredible how much is being consumed, or how much usage is happening from an iPad, even though there's plenty of other tablets that are out there. For whatever reason, folks are browsing the web a lot from their iPad. Maybe other folks are relying a lot more on applications, I guess, and maybe that's how they divided it up. But the good thing is the way that they designed the iPad mini, they made it so that you don't have to fuss with creating two different sort of applications. If you're an app developer, or if you're a brand that wants to create an application, or even has an existing application for the iPad available. And then secondly is that, because it's 1024 by 768 resolution, which is fairly standard for pretty much now, that's the smallest, that's the minimum resolution that most desktop and laptop computers will be. And that is the same resolution, funny enough, for the full-size iPad, just in different pixel density and so on. all your content's still okay, and you don't have to you don't have to worry, oh my gosh, now I've got to do something above the fold or below the fold in a different fashion when I create my website. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, I think that was interesting to pay attention to. I'd heard that that was the direction they were going to go in, just basically scaling the iPad 2 down in size, and that way you don't have to rewrite the applications. Everything works and functions the same, so that was good. And part of it is, they've got this huge environment out there that applications live within, and it continues to get bigger and bigger every day. And so I think they didn't want to put a wrinkle in that. They actually announced some numbers regarding the iPad. They said they have sold over 100 million iPads already in just the few short years that it's been around. So 100 million iPad devices. And with the addition of the iPad mini, that number is certainly going to be growing even faster in the next couple of years. So what this means, something to keep in mind is there's going to be more second screen devices out there. I think we oftentimes think of the phone as a second screen device, but for myself, I'm sure I'm not alone. When I'm at home, I'm in front of the TV, I'm watching a show. I like to have something a little easier to browse on, and oftentimes that's the iPad. I've got it out. You can browse Twitter, you can browse, some of these more specialized applications. So with the iPad mini, I see that increasing even further. It's something, a little easier to just have in your hand while you're watching TV. So definitely increased opportunities for things like live chats around events and just providing additional information on top of what's going on in front of the more traditional media device that is the TV. And then in addition to 100 million iPads, they actually announced that already over 200 million devices are running iOS 6. So you mentioned compatibility and, being able to move from one device to the other in terms of applications. Well, 200 million devices are already on iOS 6. This means that a lot of the applications can start to use features designed only for iOS 6, and devices that can't support iOS 6 or people that aren't ready to upgrade are going to, I think, be left behind. I think at this point it's probably safe to release an iOS 6 only application, and the people that can't use it now will be able to in the next couple of months, or they're just never going to be on iOS 6 and they're probably not in your target market. So a lot of interesting numbers. It's always good to get some of those official numbers coming out of Apple, not just what the analysts are estimating at, but definitely seems like a strong ecosystem and something worthy of targeting if that's your potential market.
And we want to, how I'd pay attention to it here too over the next couple of months and likely into the into January of next year, is to pay attention to just how many iPad minis are sold. And what I would think about is that number is going to help you kind of determine the velocity of folks who wanted to buy a tablet for whatever reason, didn't want to buy an Android one or a low cost one in that sense, where those are around $200, $250. But then they suddenly have been enticed to jump ship or to not jump ship, but to kind of go in whole hog, so to speak, and buy themselves a lower cost tablet. I know some folks who prefer to have the smaller 7-inch model, and this iPad mini is actually 7.9 inches, which is funny enough. It's smaller, but not that much smaller, kind of, when you really think about it. But when you look and see how many of those are sold, you'll see just how many folks who were not willing to jump on the $499, $500 and up bandwagon for tablets, who are finally deciding to be tablet owners. And if that's going to backfill the amount of owners who are going to be consuming content now, your website, and potentially, ebooks and all those sorts of things for the first time on a tablet device, how much that accelerates it by the sales that you see in the iPad mini. And are you paying attention to that in the sense of having your website ready for mobile consumers and optimizing it for the touch experience and the swipe experience and the smaller screen experience now? That is going to become really mandatory over the next couple of years for folks.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to talk about regarding the event was the fact that Apple live streamed it. So this is really cool. It's actually how I tuned in. Normally I read a variety of the live blogs that go up, The Verge and Engadget, they all live blog it. But
or somebody in the audience streaming it from their desk, from their computer illegally when they're not supposed to, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But this was the first time that Apple, as far as I can remember, put out an official live stream that basically brought the event to the public. And they did so a variety of ways. So you could tune in through, Safari browser and iOS devices, and that made a lot of sense. But they also sort of pushed a new application out to Apple TV, and you could just load up this application and watch the live stream in full HD on your TV through the Apple TV.
That's how I watched it, actually. Did you watch it like that?
That's how I watched it as well. We have an Apple TV at the office, and rather than have to figure out how to configure my computer to project on the monitor, we just loaded up the Apple TV, fired up that app, and had it live streamed right in front of us. And why I thought this was interesting is the expectation of consumers, I think, is shifting. So 10 years ago, brands and companies really had the ability to control their message, and you could put something out there and you could bring a couple of, reporters or writers and kind of embargo the news and say, hey, we're going to show this to you, but we want you to sit on it for a little bit before you put it out in the public. And then slowly but surely that became a very narrow window. And previously with live blogs, it was basically seconds before Apple said something and it was out into the public. And I think this is now Apple taking control back from those third-party services that were, relaying the message, but not necessarily doing so in the way that Apple wanted it to be said. So rather than having everything transcribed live, they just said, hey, let's open it up and let's let people tune in live to the event. So I think there's lessons to be learned. I think if Apple's willing to take the steps to, give people a behind-the-scenes look at their event and really give it, straight from the horse's mouth. There was no filter. They said, hey, you can tune into our actual event. You can hear us talking about it. We want to control the message. I think that makes a lot of sense for other brands to follow as well. That control over the message, that idea of, not filtering yourself through PR or through some other type of outlet, but instead saying, let's really take control and let's figure out who we need to put in front of the camera or what process we need to put in place so that people are tuning into us and tuning into our own live stream and, our own way of talking about ourselves. I thought that was really cool. What was your experience watching it through the live stream, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, so I thought that was great as well. It ended up allowing me to focus, like you were saying, less on trying to figure out what sites I wanted to have all set up on my browsers and so on, and just watch the event I think I didn't think about it until you said it the way you did. It's as if Apple is saying, look, we're going to let you know all the facts about the product the way we want to, and let's rely on everybody to do the product reviews and comparisons and things like that, rather than to relay all the information that couldn't be easily relayed because we weren't making our content accessible. Even though Apple did usually by the end of the day put their keynote up and make it available to folks, it kind of made it more an event-driven thing because of that, because people were wanting to participate all at the time that it was broadcast. I think the interesting thing about the keynote to me was really more about the dynamic element of who was on stage and the fun that they actually had and the personality that they had during the event. So when you were watching, you got to hear, some jokes. When they had the Mac Mini released, they said you knew something with the word mini was going to be released. Not even yet saying anything about the the iPad Mini. But I agree with you. I think it'll be interesting to see how they might do that a little bit more. Take the event. They did it very close to where their company is located instead of going to San Francisco, which is, an hour away, and likely takes a lot more effort to produce some sort of event in that fashion. And they had a whole area there at the theater after the fact for press to come and play with the stuff. And that was the area where they really got the hands-on information and was able to disseminate that with the folks that are reading their blogs and other sources.
All in all, some good announcements. I don't think anything that'll have a really drastic effect on marketers and advertisers, but the smaller form factor will be interesting to pay attention to. I think, like Adam said, pay attention to making sure your mobile site or your website is mobile optimized. Though that's been advice for a while, so hopefully that's not a new message for you. But good stuff coming out of the Apple camp, and it'll be interesting to pay attention to how consumers respond. All right, so the next topic we're going to jump into is Facebook limiting the reach of brands' wall posts and how some brands are responding. So I think that we've talked about this in the past where, brands are quickly discovering that, hey, when you say something on Facebook, it's no longer going to that big fan number that you see on your page. It's going to a much smaller subset, oftentimes anywhere from 5 to 15%. But if you think about it, 15% is a really small chunk of this overall fan base that you've worked so hard to build up. And so what we're starting to see are brands trying to find workarounds to actually help them reach more of their fan base. And Adam, you actually discovered almost a chain letter that people are sending around as a way of, working around this Facebook system. How'd you discover this, and does it make sense? What was your initial take when you saw this? Were you like, oh, I guess that is something brands should do, or were you thinking, this seems like a little bit of a futile effort?
Well, let me quickly read it to the listeners here so they can hear. And I actually saw this in a couple different places. I saw a few other folks who were sharing in this, and this was brought to my attention by a friend of mine named Ramon, who is managing social media for a company in the East Coast. And he saw this sent from another page that he was a fan of and wanted to know whether this was something he really needed to pay attention to, because it was a little bit alarmist the way that it was written. So what it says is, dear fans, some of you may already be aware of this newest Facebook issue. Facebook now requires page admins to pay to promote their updates if we want our content to be seen by our fans. If we do not pay to promote our posts, only about 10% of our fans receive the updates on our Facebook homepage feed. To keep receiving all posts from us, you have to hover the mouse on the like button, blah, 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 blah. And they basically talk about, in the drop down, select add to interest lists, then create an interest list and add our page. So you won't miss anything important. We recommend that you follow the above instructions for any Facebook page you care about, so you can continue seeing all the posts from all the pages you love. Thanks for your help. Please share, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a couple things going on here. I mean, one is, and I think you were talking about it a bit, Corey, and you've heard of it, that so Facebook has their EdgeRank algorithm, and most people now rely on that EdgeRank algorithm to deliver them content that they like, that's relevant, and that sort of thing. Not always in real time. If something gets posted, and if in the old days of Facebook, it was all done time based, whatever was the most recent thing would be posted, and then if you weren't there at the time of that piece of content being published, you missed out. It just would fall down the waterfall of the feed and would be gone. And so now there's the option to see most recent content, but also to see the top content. And top content is based off of your interaction with folks. It's based off of the type of content that it is. So, for instance, videos and images are seen more often, usually. And then, of course, content that you click on or that you've shown interest in and engaged with, whether it be a page or whether it be your friends. And so most people rely on the top content, the top posts versus the recent posts. And that's under heavy control over Facebook's EdgeRank algorithm. And in the past, I don't know if the numbers have been any different, but there have been there has been some discussion and a little bit of disclosure from Facebook that the amount of folks, the amount of fans from a business page perspective that see your content is under 20% that actually on average see your content. That's not a lot. Like you were saying earlier, that's not a lot. And it starts to feel like now that Facebook has gotten has gotten much more popular, and people have relied on putting their eggs in that basket, that Facebook having control over what essentially is the filter to whether your content is seen by many or seen by few is potentially manipulating that a little bit. Now, I don't know that for sure, but that's just what it feels like a bit. And what's happening is, as people are discovering this with their pages, and Facebook is pushing sponsored content a little bit more, they feel now suddenly pages feel that they can't just engage with folks. They actually have to pay to play and pay to have exposure. And so they're trying to find a workaround. And the workaround, funny enough, is telling folks to create interest lists, which is a feature that most people aren't even still aware of, that they could use regardless. And that why wouldn't they just say, if you're interested in us, if you want to check out our content, come to my page. If you care that much, you're going to come over to our page and check out our content. Because if people create interest lists, that means they've got to then switch the content that they're viewing in their feed to whatever that interest list is to view it instead. So you've got top news, you've got most recent, and then you've got to dive into each of these interest lists in order to see what the content is there. And so although it's making it sound like it's making it easier for people to pay attention to your content, it's in a way causing some more friction, some added friction for the user, and sounding a bit more alarmist than I think that it needs to feel.
Yeah, I think the idea of creating interest lists is a bit of a stretch. I think that, most people aren't going to do it. If they were going to create interest lists, if they were really going to slice and dice their Facebook feed, they would have already. And I think that trying to say, oh, you really need to create these interest lists to make sure you get all of our updates, that's a pretty big ask. And I don't think that that's a behavior that people are going to adapt just so that they can suddenly see all of this page content. The other thing I think is, again, I said it when I was kind of introducing this topic, but it's basically people trying to work around the Facebook system, which means all Facebook has to do is re-implement the system to their interest list, and suddenly that workaround goes away. So if you've spent all this time and really pushed people, add us to our interest list, and then suddenly Facebook applies an edge rank to an interest list, it's the exact same situation, it's the exact same problem. And not to mention, if somebody added 500 brands to an interest list, they're not going to see your post regardless. They're going to see, pretty much the same number of posts as they're seeing currently. So it's a pretty big ask. I don't think it's going to work for most brands. I think it's trying to work around the Facebook system in a way that Facebook could easily kind of close that loophole. So I don't recommend people repost this message. I don't recommend that people, try to get this interest list going. I think that you kind of have to play within the Facebook system. And, maybe one lesson to take from this, if you are going to take action, is to dial down the percentage of your overall marketing effort that Facebook represents. I think we've talked about this before. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, even if that basket has 1 billion users. Facebook is not going away anytime soon, but they also have a lot of control over your message in a way that a blog or a newsletter does not. You control a blog and you control a newsletter, and people can subscribe to those and be essentially guaranteed to receive all of your updates versus a Facebook page, they're not. So, don't abandon Facebook. This isn't a reason to move away from Facebook entirely, but do realize that Facebook has control over your marketing message and that you're kind of having to pay to play now. And so if you're either not willing to do that or that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, then maybe it's time to reevaluate your overall marketing mix. So I was actually going to say, taking that into account, maybe we could talk a little bit about sponsoring content and when is appropriate to sponsor content. How do you sponsor content to make sure you're getting the most value out of that? Because I do think it's interesting. I think that more and more brands should experiment with sponsoring posts within Facebook. It's not necessarily an extremely expensive thing. I think, people, maybe they're afraid, I'm going to have to spend all this money to get a good response. But I think with well-timed and well-planned Facebook media spend, you can really see a good response for that dollar. So, Adam, do you have any advice on, maybe when to actually look at Facebook's sponsored post and ad platform system as a way of promoting your own content?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few of them, and I think as you were referring to the term previously when we were talking about this topic off the air, and I've heard it referred in a lot of other ways. If you look at it in parallel to or in the same terms, you look at your search engine marketing and search engine advertising as paid versus organic. That when you're paying for visibility to either gain access to eyeballs where the eyeballs may not care to see the message. So if the message is not maybe as engaging, but it is something still that you want to have seen for the sake of branding and messaging versus actual cost per click or, click throughs, or it becomes, something that hopefully for a period of time drives clicks in engagement to when there might normally not have been that opportunity, in order then for you to follow through with, what I mean by that is to say you need people to start liking your page, or you need people to see a potential a particular contest that you have. So let's take a look at the Lay's campaign that we talked about a few episodes ago, and I don't remember what it was. It was something about tasting flavor, was choosing a new flavor for the Lay's chips, but it was very focused on Facebook and on getting you to connect an application and then to say what were your top 2 or 3 suggestions for flavors for the new Lay's line of chips. Well, with something like that, that's time-based, and you have a very limited time where you want people to be contributing content to your fan page on Facebook, and the contest itself has a few kind of hooks, because not only are you contributing content, maybe engaging with stuff on their Facebook page, but you're also attaching a Facebook app. So you're giving permissions to that Facebook app, and you are connecting yourself and almost in a way opening yourself up to receiving more content and information from Lay's, even outside of Facebook, with that sort of campaign. And in that case, it would make sense to put money into being seen, gaining more visibility, and also because of the increased pass along effect that they had on those. It was not only do you submit your flavor, but you actually kind of in a way share it with friends and solicit with friends to go ahead and vote for that flavor and everything as well. And so with an experience that's optimized in a way that gathers information and connects you a little bit more closely with your fans and consumers, and also has an increased pass along effect and has a time-based model to it, those are all good circumstances to pay attention and say, how maybe we should ratchet up our Facebook advertising for the time being. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, the other opportunities I see are, one, anything that's broadly targeted. So a lot of times maybe you're writing specific updates that are only going to be interesting to your fans. That's probably not a good opportunity to spend a little extra to promote it, but maybe you're asking more of a general question, what's your favorite X, or what would you do in situation Y? I think that's a good opportunity to sponsor it. Because it's something that a lot of people can participate in, and especially if people can participate in a quick and easy manner. So don't sponsor something where you're asking people to write an entire 3-paragraph story about their favorite childhood memory. Sponsor something where somebody can feel like they're involved with a couple of word answers, and it gets this community feeling going. And I think that you'll see a strong response to that. The other thing to keep in mind is when you are using Facebook ad dollars to sponsor a story, there's also an additional viral pass along. So you're not having to buy every single view. I've actually noticed that it seems to be kind of a 50-50 split. So if in the end your $10 or $20 to sponsor your story generates, let's say, 10,000 paid impressions, Facebook also delivers 10,000 viral impressions on top of that, which really helps to maximize your spend and reach more folks. And there's definitely a benefit of putting a little money into the Facebook ad coffers. The last thing to keep in mind is, make sure you're sponsoring things that are driving towards some sort of goal. I see a lot of brands where, they're like, happy color day. What's your favorite color? Well, sure, you could sponsor that and you're going to get a lot of responses, but is that going to help your brand? I think the answer is no. So find something that is related to your brand, but kind of hits that sweet spot of being easy to answer, yet still pushing the brand forward. Sponsor that, test out some ad spend and see what works. And it is a little bit of a test and learn. You've got to see what works for your individual audience. I think it's, we can't make broad sweeping suggestions because every audience is going to be different, but, start broadly, learn some lessons, spend a little bit against those lessons, and then hopefully optimize as you go forward. And you'll find that it doesn't take a lot to actually really get a feel for what works and what doesn't. And then you'll be spending in a way that a lot of brands aren't. You'll be spending smart dollars to increase your brand, to really get your message out there. And I think you'll have a leg up on a number of brands that aren't out there experimenting and kind of testing to see what works for them.
So you have a tool review this week, and funny enough is as you were discovering this great new tool, you found out that it was kind of fizzling away and it was an experiment and kind of is going to be shut down soon, right?
Exactly. We are going to do a tool review this week about a tool that no longer exists. Despite that fact, I did want to leave it in because I thought it was very interesting. So, the thing we're looking at this week is called Frank. Frank was an iOS application and it allowed you to submit a photo, which would then be reviewed by an actual person who would provide a caption for that photo and send it back to you. I discovered Frank yesterday, actually. So, I installed this application, I sent a photo, I received a caption back. I thought this thing was cool. I was like, oh man, I want to talk about this on the show. I really like this concept. So then I'm getting ready for the show today, and I get an IM from somebody that I'd showed it to, and they're like, Frank is gone. And I was like, what do you mean Frank's gone? They're like, I don't know, go to the website and look. And it turns out in a single day, I think I happened to just have poorly timed it. It's been around for about a month, but they basically explained that it was an experiment. So the app was made by a company called Terrarium, and if you go to the website now, it just says Frank is no longer available. It was an experiment.
Frank has retired.
Frank has retired. And they talked about it in their blog. They were basically playing around with Mechanical Turk. So they were using Amazon's service to crowdsource these captions for the photos. But, a couple of things that's interesting about that. So number one is we talk a lot on SoLoMo show about how you always need to be experimenting. Well, this was a case where somebody else was experimenting and people that were using this app were on the receiving end of that experiment. And so, I think you can't really hold it against them. You can't say, what do you mean you took away this great tool? It's like, well, that's their prerogative. And if they were running an experiment against Amazon Mechanical Turk, then, you got a little bit of use out of it, but it was a free application. It's not like I paid anything to use it. I was a little bummed because I was like, oh, this app is awesome and I want to use it more. And then suddenly 24 hours later, it's gone. But
Frank is no slave to you.
Frank is no slave to me. But, it also goes to show that, again, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. If you had seen this application and were like, oh man, this is the best. We're going to do every single message from here on out. We're going to run it through Frank. We're going to post those images only. And then suddenly, 24 hours later, it's gone, and that entire strategy is gone up in smoke as well. I think that, you've got to be careful. So, yes, you could play around with it. You could submit a couple of photos and say, oh, we're going to have some fun with that. We're going to repost these to our Facebook account and really, use this for what it's worth. But you also have to be ready if suddenly you log into what you think is going to be your new favorite app and it's gone and there's no way to use it. There's no way to bring it back. So, experiment with it, have some fun, but also don't just jump into the next best thing and think, oh, this is going to be the hit. This is going to be what really, takes my marketing to the next level, because you never know when an app is just going to be gone the next day. This was not a rinky-dink operation. This was a well-designed app. It had a number of really interesting features. It had a great-looking website. It had a lot of branding around it. All signs would have pointed to this being a serious competitor in the mobile photo space, and yet 24 hours later it was gone. So, lesson learned. I think it wasn't a tough lesson to learn. Again, I didn't spend money to buy the app. It was free. It was kind of fun to play around with. But I also think that it was interesting that, had the shutdown happened 24 hours later, I would have gone out and recommended this app, and suddenly people would have been using it. And, you never know when things could change. So keep that in mind, and maybe check out the Frank website, see what the experiment was all about. But unfortunately, you cannot download and use this app. So I'm going to have to give it the 2 thumbs down.
And I just checked out the site, and I think now they've got on the page just says, Frank's gone, and if you want to be a part of other experiments or be privy to them, then just go ahead and put your email in. And so just to clarify, if I for the listeners, because I think the concept is still kind of cool and can be utilized in other ways, using Facebook, using Instagram. So what they did, Corey, was you would take any photo that you wanted to with your phone, you would upload that photo, and then randomly at some point in time it would come back with some funny quip caption put onto it.
Yeah, you'd submit it, and then the app would say, all right, I've received your photo, and hang tight. And then anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour later, it would send a push notification and say, all right, your processed photo is ready. And Frank would put a color filter over top of the photo, so it kind of gave it a really interesting look to it. And then it had a little caption in the bottom left, and the caption was related to the subject of the photo. It was usually pretty funny. And then from there, you could share it through Twitter or through Facebook. Instagram was notably absent from that list. You could not share it via Instagram, which I thought was interesting. But the idea was they were doing some of the work for you. They were providing a clever caption, and then you could share it with your own fans. So definitely a cool idea. I wouldn't be surprised to see something similar pop up because hopefully it inspired somebody else to keep it going. But that was the general idea behind it. You'd send them a photo and they'd send you back a caption.
So it's almost like crowdsourcing, or depending on who they had doing it. Like you said, they were using Mechanical Turk, and that means there may have been some rules in there. When Mechanical Turk, for our listeners, is essentially an online interface that goes with bunch of tons and tons of people who are willing to do small tasks for very little money, usually on their computer, and they do everything from checking to see. I'm trying to think of some examples, but nonetheless, it's probably safe to say that the people who were told to do this task, or who were paid to do this task, were paid 5 cents or 10 cents an image, and were likely given rules where they weren't supposed to put something that would be offensive or something like that on there. Because I was thinking, you're kind of rolling the dice as to what could happen. But I think the better way to look at this concept is to say, why can't your fans, be a part of this and have fun with it? And maybe instead of getting one image, you end up getting, or one caption for an image, you end up getting dozens of fun captions for a particular image, or making contests out of it where you've got the image and in the comments are where people could submit funny captions for it, or whatever the case may be. So I think the concept is really cool. I think as an experiment, it would have been really interesting to see how that difference in dynamic would have maybe sprouted something very interesting. But we will never know unless the fathers of Frank will release some of the information that they've reaped from their experiment.
All right, Adam. You know what time it is then?
Thunder, lightning round, right?
The lightning round. All right, I've got 60 seconds on the clock, and I'm going to give the first story to you because this was something you came across. So ready and go.
All right, so there is a restaurant called the Komodo in NYC in New York City, and they kind of are trying to exploit the fact that people enjoy taking photos of their food. And so with that said, they had a video that they put together called the Instagram menu that was basically pitching to folks who went to Komodo to take a look at their Instagram feed in order to see shots of their dishes that they were serving at their restaurant, in order to give them an idea of what they might want to buy and dig into. And so this is kind of in a way like using Instagram for food spotting in a way. And I thought it was an interesting. It was a creative thing for them to be pitching, and the fact that they went as far as putting together an actual YouTube commercial for it was pretty interesting as well.
All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go. So I thought this was interesting, though I think there was a lot of missed opportunity here. So yes, the idea of taking this, social behavior, a lot of people going to the restaurant, taking pictures of their food, that was kind of cool. And then I think what they were hoping is that people would see this hashtag in the feed of their friends. You're probably friends with people that live near you, so you'd see the hashtag, you'd click on it, and suddenly you'd be flooded with this giant visual menu. That was a cool opportunity. I think what they missed out on is actually rewarding people for sharing the photos. So as far as I could tell, they didn't say, hey, share a photo on Instagram and next drink's on us, or free appetizer, or anything like that, which really would have driven home the action. The other thing is they just had a small share on Instagram with the hashtag at the bottom of their menu. I think they could have had signage to get more photos, and again, really directing people to both share photos and check out the photos of other people. Make sure to reward people for giving value back to your own company. All right, 60 seconds on the clock for story number 2. Ready and go. So this was a story that Business Week put together, and it was talking about how male shoppers are actually outdoing women, and it was talking in terms of annual growth rates. So yes, more women shop online, but in terms of who's increasing the amount of shopping they're doing, men are actually shopping more often online than women are lately. And what that's coming from is this shift in the way that people are able to shop. So it talked about how department stores and the traditional shopping experience was mostly designed for women, but men have really flocked to online shopping because it provides convenience and a fast kind of in and out shopping experience. And I thought the overall idea was really interesting that online sites have really catered to men in a way that offline shopping wasn't able to. And as a result, men are buying more and spending more online. I think there's really an opportunity here to, think about this for a number of different ways, kind of catering your message to your market and making sure that it really hits on the needs of that market. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on the increase in male shopping online? Ready, go.
So the way that I read it a little bit is maybe not that it was a convenient in and out experience, so to speak. You were mentioning, Corey, that you thought it might have to do with the ability for folks for men to be very quick in how they are in their shopping experience. I think men like to kind of chill a little bit as they're buying and compare prices and all those sorts of things. And like you said, it's not something that would have been easy for folks to do out at the mall. And men's experiences of going shopping out at the mall, especially men outside of, say, the 18-year-old realm, when they're not hanging out with their friends. It's usually hanging out with the girlfriend while she's out shopping, or hanging out with the wife while they're out shopping. And so, like you said, the shift in being able to shop online, I think, is making a huge difference. And that's why there's so much room to grow in that market.
All right, with 3 seconds to go, you will save us from the lightning round.
I know that if whoever is watching the live feed, if they could see when Corey holds it up in the last 5 seconds, like my heart starts going, a sudden surge of adrenaline. I'm like, I must finish this story now. All right, on to the third one.
All right, 60 seconds back on the clock. Ready and go. So Food Spotting recently announced a update to their foodspotting.com website. And along with that, they announced that Food Spotting now has 2.5 million dishes on display. And so what they're doing is redesigning the website to focus on discovery. We're seeing this a lot. We talked about it in the past with Foursquare. A lot of these applications, now that they've got a lot of data, in Food Spotting's case, 2.5 million dishes, they can really switch their focus to less on incentivizing people to add more data and more on repurposing the data they already have. So they, unified the site and their applications, really put the focus on the photos. They want to show off the food. They want to highlight it. So I think if you're a brand, play into this. Make sure that your photos are great. Maybe, again, encourage people to share photos. We just saw a great story about how a restaurant was encouraging its people to share photos. Don't shy away from the opportunity. I think there's, yes, you might not get the most talented photographers in every week, but there are going to be some good photos shared. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on the new Food Spotting? Ready, go.
I was thinking of it from a couple different angles. One is that they started mobile and then went to the web, right? Where there's the term out there, mobile first, which is usually related to designing for mobile before for the web. But there's been a number of companies that have been doing that from the beginning in regards to their business model. I think Foursquare is one of them, and same thing with Instagram. And much like Foursquare, also who also redesigned their website for more discovery. They use the mobile experience to help lay the groundwork and gather all the data that they eventually were able to expose once they built enough of a data layer up. And so it's nice to see Food Spotting doing this, but how could companies potentially do this in the future for something that they are doing? How could they build up a data set and then eventually leverage that data set for some sort of online digital experience for folks?
All right, saving us from the lightning round sound. And we actually have 4 stories for the lightning round, so we will dive into the last one now. Ready and go. So Clout recently updated their iOS app, which on its own I was pretty impressed with the Clout app. It's now compatible with the iPhone 5. It's really slick. It's got some cool graphing. You can use their Clout kind of plus K right through the application. But one of the big additions was that now you can have a Clout Passbook app. So you can bring your Clout along with you. It includes a little QR code that you can use to scan for things like perks. And I think this idea is really interesting. It's not really being used yet. So right now they've put it out there and said, hey, brands take advantage of this. But you could see opportunities. You could see things like letting people scan for coupons, or if you had an event and you wanted to have a VIP clout line, suddenly that's a lot easier. People don't have to print things out or think about it ahead of time. It's going to allow people to turn perks over a lot faster. It's going to allow people to have perks on the go. I really think this is a cool opportunity. I just hope that brands take advantage of it. All right, Adam, what's your take on the Clout Perk app? Ready and go.
So I think it's a little bit lacking. I think it's interesting that they decided to jump into Passbook, but all it really is this, like an ID card that just has your Clout number on it. It for whatever reason, mine's not even showing my photo, but it's got a little place where it seems the photo should be, and it automatically updates when your Clout score goes up and down. And so, it goes to the Clout debate of whether or not Clout is something for folks that are a bit more pretentious than others, or what. Nobody's really offering that sort of thing. I think Clout could probably, I don't know what you could take the application that there is already on the iPhone and just show that if you really, really wanted to. And there's more features, more functionality in there to help you manage your Cloud experience. So I think it's a little lacking, but we'll see. Again, they may just be quote unquote experimenting, as we say, and we might see some other things flesh out here. Maybe there's some partnerships that they have that we're unaware of at the moment.
Yeah, I like the idea of partnerships. All right, well, we covered a lot of topics today, but as always, we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions about those topics, or maybe suggested topics for next episode, if you want to give us feedback, or hey, even if you just want to say hi, we definitely encourage that. We'd love to hear from our readers, get to know you a little better, and hear what you are interested in. So there's a number of ways to do that, one of which is via Twitter. We're both available at SoLoMo Show, or I can be reached directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email both Corey and I. We have a Gmail account. So that is solomoshow@gmail.com. solomoshow@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page where we share things beyond the show and other things we find throughout the week that are interesting to us. Same thing on Google+, where we're probably a little less active, but you can go over there if you're a Google Pluser nonetheless. And we have a Pinterest account with a few different boards that show everything from our tool reviews to the folks that we've interviewed, and also all the episodes that we've had in the past. So Pinterest does allow you to put in YouTube videos, and that's what we do there. So go there and repin to your heart's content.
There we go. And as always, all of the links that we discussed today, as well as the links to these social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. And if you're wondering where to see those, they're viewable both at solomoshow.com, that's the SoLoMo Show website, or inside of your podcast player. There should be an option to view show notes, and you'll see all of the links that we talked about. It's a chance to dive a little deeper, get your hands dirty with some of the stories that we talked about, maybe form your own opinions. We don't get a chance to cover every aspect of every story that we talked about on the show, so if something piqued your interest, feel free to dive into the show notes and learn a little bit more about it. If we had one request of the fans, it would be to rate us in iTunes. It definitely helps us to get the show out there, help more people discover it. It's pretty easy to do. If you just go to solomoshow.com/review, you will actually see an entire walkthrough that we put together for how to rate the show in iTunes. So would love if you could take a minute out of your day and rate us in iTunes if you hadn't had a chance to do so. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of the SoLoMo Show.
Take care.